It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, what is going on?
Smitty almost died today. Almost took the big afternoon drive into the sky. And nearly killed by one of my oldest and most loyal friends. I was sitting in the Steelers media room drinking iced tea, as, if you know me, is common.
Mm-hmm.
Just got some down the wrong pipe, started choking. It's like red in the face, nearly passed out. People called for a doctor. It was tense for a second. And then I pulled through. Now I'm fine.
So wait, the T is one of your oldest friends?
Yes.
Okay.
Somewhere out there, a Steelers player was probably like, "Man, I got a hamstring. Where's the trainer at?" And they were all running over to me. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here.
What kind of tea was it?
Just regular old iced tea.
Like what brand?
I don't know. Whatever's in the fountain at the facility.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Use maybe one of those, one of the little iced tea machines where you push the button and.
Okay. I was like, okay, if we're talking like a Turner's carton or something, I don't think Turner's would do that to you. I don't think they'd have the audacity to. Yeah.
No, I
try
just
to take it off.
And it was so I've had a near death experience. Not actually. I was fine, but apparently everybody else was very concerned about my well-being.
Okay. Well, you love to see that. You appreciate the fact that so many people were concerned about that. So would you say that you were limited today? Limited participant?
Definitely not a full practice today. Definitely not.
Okay.
And so we'll have to keep an eye out on my status for Friday just to be sure about whether I'll be able to go this Sunday.
Yeah. We mentioned yesterday, we can give a little bit of a rundown again, another day closer to game day in terms of where we're at with injury stuff. Calvin Austin, you said looked really good today, which is, again, if it didn't look great during the game and they were concerned about it. Tomlin said 48 hours later, the prognosis of it looks very good. Maybe he'll be limited early in practice, but all signs point to him being able to go in this one.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Nick Farabah set out to find out who the backup punt returner is if Austin can't play, and nobody seems to know who it is. So apparently the Steelers are not panicking and thinking that Calvin Austin isn't going to play, because I assume that would be a thing they would want to figure out. But I think he talked to Calvin, I think he talked to Miles Boykin, and I think he talked to one other person too, maybe James Pierre. And because Boykin and Pierre have Boykin has some NFL punt returns, I think Pierre has a couple college ones, and nobody knows still. So I don't know. I think he's going to play. Mon Adams and Minkah feeling very confident that they're going to play and going to be back in the fold. And Allen Robinson had a day off yesterday. He's back. They're still resting Cam Hayward, but I'm not concerned about it. Diontae Johnson missed practice with an illness today. I guess that's the one maybe concerning thing to monitor for Friday.
I think he was sick of talking. Is what I believe was the illness that he came down with.
It's very possible. He just they moved practice inside, so maybe he was just outside and he saw practice moving, but he just didn't really react to that at all. He stayed right there outside.
What's funny is we said yesterday we wanted to stop talking, but when the jokes present themselves, I mean, you got to take the opportunity to make them. A news here thing, the Steelers and Colts, we were waiting to see what the time would be. Officially, they will play on Saturday, December 16th, 4:30. They will be part of that 3-game slate on that Saturday. What are they calling it? It has a special name, doesn't it? Saturday Showcase or something stupid like that or something. You got the Bengals and Vikings at 1:00. You got that game at 4:30. And then the Lions and Broncos, I believe, is the late game. Pretty random matchups when you talk about the teams that are facing each other. But that will mean that the Steelers week 14, Thursday night football, week 15, Saturday football, week 16, Saturday football. So 3 straight Sundays after this against the Cardinals without Steelers football.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but it's not bad, I think, for the team perspective because it kind of keeps you
No.
more of a normal routine, right? Like you don't get the big layoff after Thursday night football, and then you have a regular week Saturday to Saturday, and that regular week Saturday to Saturday um, leads into the following week where we'll have an extra day, but it's Christmas. So they're going to get Christmas off on their extra day. Like it works out pretty nicely for the team, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to mention that. So, yeah, it throws things a little bit out of whack from what the normal NFL schedule would look like for teams. But especially after that one against the Bengals, you're going to have Christmas off and you have the extra day before you play Seattle. So,
Yeah, extra
you
day
know,
going into a long road trip. Like I don't know. It
yeah.
just I think it ends up working out pretty nicely.
Yeah, I would agree. Alan, I think this is going to be a day where we get to some questions. But first, I mentioned when we jumped on here, if you had anything, of course, as I always do, that you for sure wanted to talk about, you told me you have a bit of a hot take for us with the Arizona Cardinals coming here. Everybody knows their running back, James Conner, from his time at Pitt, from his time at the Pittsburgh Steelers, now with the Arizona Cardinals. And yeah, you said you have a hot take regarding James Conner.
Yeah, I did. I wrote a pretty long story about James today, SteelersNow.com. Check it out. Talked to, James talked to the media in Arizona, and I broke down that. And then also talked to Cam Hayward and a couple other people about his return. Interesting perspective from Cam just about, does he like playing guys that he knows? I thought that was an interesting question. Like, do you look forward to that? Do you kind of have to like, oh, I don't really like doing it, but it's part of what I have to do. And he said, so at the end of the day, it's about competition. Like if you can't compete with guys you're friends with, like how like those are the easy people to compete with. So I thought that was an interesting take, interesting perspective, and it's a good story. Go check it out. I've obviously known James for a very long time, covered him when he was at Pitt, and I have a lot of respect for him as a player and as a person. And I came to the conclusion. I thought this then too, but as I was writing and talking to people for this story, like I kind of think the Steelers screwed up by letting him go. I think they would have been better off keeping James Conner instead of drafting Najee Harris in 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you looking back on it, obviously spending a first round pick on a running back, I regardless, I was like, Najee, I love the player. He could be fantastic for them. I just don't love the idea of spending a first round pick on a running back. So I would have been with you for sure then. I think what it came down to was health more than anything else. Like when he was on the field, sure, he was productive, but you get the sense maybe they were just like, we can't trust this guy to be on the field either. And that's why they decided to part ways.
Well, like they kind of did, but then they've also like since then kind of come to the realization that you can't trust anyone to be on the field. And even if you do go get someone like Naji Harris that you use a first round draft pick, then all of a sudden you don't want him to be on the field every down because you don't want him to get hurt. Like like it seems like that their realization that you need to have two running backs came too late to save James Conner in their eyes when he is really an ideal current NFL running back because his injuries don't matter because you need two of them anyway. And it's fine. Like it doesn't hurt you like it did if you have one guy who's trying to play 90% of the snaps.
I brought up the irony of them finding an undrafted guy in Jaylen Warren after, a couple years of spending mid-round picks on the Benny Snells and Anthony McFarlands of the worlds that, haven't worked out great, obviously, or didn't work out great in the case of Benny Snell, who's no longer here. But, you almost wonder, say they find a guy like Jaylen Warren while James Conner still is here. Maybe that changes the way things go.
Right? Like and look, would 2021 have gone well with James Conner? Like he missed two games, I think, that year. Like that was the year Najee played almost every snap. Benny Snell was, I don't know, serviceable, but not, well, it wasn't ideal. But like, think about like what they could have done with that first round pick. Like even if the tackle that they really needed wasn't there, they could have traded up like they did this year. They could have traded down, drafted a center, like Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson, and like fix the offensive line that they are still dealing with as a problem right now, 3 years in advance. Like I don't know, it feels like they got that wrong.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that, and I wonder how much of this, not for you, obviously, but like trying to go into the mind of the fan base as well, how much is also going to play into the opinion that he is a pick guy, and had those ties. It was probably hard for people to detach themselves from that as well. So I'm very curious in terms of the audience, what they're going to think about this too, just because you talk about a guy that was so productive at Pitt, obviously the story that he had, beating cancer, the ACL injury that he had as well in college. I mean, overcame so much to get to the point where he was. Third round pick, had to sit behind Le'Veon. Le'Veon sits out. He bursts onto the scene immediately and is super productive, becomes a Pro Bowler in his own right. I mean, the story was there for sure. And I think it was hard for people to see him go the way that it did, especially, when the primary reason was the fact that he couldn't stay on the field. But to your points, we've seen teams kind of get away from the idea of needing just one bell cow back anyway.
And like it's pretty rare that the Steelers miss like this. Like very infrequently does someone come into this stadium as a former Steelers player who is generally really well liked and generally really productive that the Steelers let get away. Like it doesn't happen very often, and we've seen it a couple times this year. Javon Hargrave came at the beginning of the year. I just really think that obviously the COVID year and the salary cap implications made things hard for guys like Hargrave and Juju in that era. But I feel like Connor was more of a choice where they just decided that he wasn't the guy. And I think they got that choice wrong.
Right, like at least that first year of his time in Arizona, right? Like 1 year, 1.5 million. Now he's since signed another deal for 321 or whatever. And if you want to say you wouldn't have paid him $7 million or whatever it was, but if you're lumping all 4 of those years together, what they've gotten for him, man, I feel like he's returned that value to Arizona.
Yeah, I think Arizona's very happy to have him, and they started with Chase Edmonds with him. And now he's kind of the guy. Like they have other running backs, but DeMarcado plays a little bit, but I mean it's pretty much him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, which is great for him, to see him succeed over there and stuff. And it makes sense. It's Arizona too, Steelers West out there in Arizona. We see a ton of former Pittsburgh players end up in Arizona. But yeah, he's certainly playing well there, and I think that there definitely is a case that the Steelers messed up on that one. Okay, do you want to get to some questions, or do you have anything else on that?
No, that's pretty much all I got. It is not as much Steelers West as it used to be. There's not that many. There was a time when it was like you knew every person on that coaching staff, and you knew all the players. Spencer Whipple, son of Steelers former quarterbacks coach and former Pitt offensive coordinator Mark Whipple, he's not the quarterbacks coach anymore. He's got a promotion from that, but it's like pass game coordinator, I think, or something like that, for the Cardinals. And then Kelvin Beachum,
pass game specialist. Yeah,
pass game specialist. There you go. Kelvin Beachum, former Steelers offensive lineman. I believe he's hurt. I'm not sure that he is healthy.
But I thought he was going to retire, but yeah, he did sign a new deal there. Okay. Yeah, so we got it was actually a couple days ago. I was looking for one question and I had 20 people reply to this, of course. Days where I'm looking for a bunch, we rarely get any. Mike Lowry here wants to know, going forward, do we see a path to Washington getting any plays designed for him with the new offensive coordinators?
No, I don't think they're going to specifically design plays for Darnell Washington. I mean, I think he has a role as the second tight end, and it's the same, it's the same role that we saw Zach Gentry being in this offense last year. It's the same thing that Washington has done. They have there's really 2 tight end positions. I don't know what the Steelers designations for them are. Some teams call them like Y and F, or some teams call them F and G or whatever, but you have that flexed out tight end spot. Really there's 3. You have that flexed out tight end spot that we see Pat Freiermuth used in a lot. We actually saw a lot of that usage from Freiermuth in the last game, more than we have seen in the past. You have that attached to the formation, sort of traditional, classic, think Heath Miller, Mark Bruner, old school tight end, hand in the ground. And then you have that kind of wing back, H back thing that they do a lot with Connor Hayward So there's really always been those sort of three tight end body positions in this offense, and Washington certainly fills that traditional wide tight end role very well, but I don't think they're going to do anything specifically just for him, nor do I think they need to. I think he does a nice job blocking, and I think he gets open enough. He's not a very good route runner yet, but I think he gets open enough. He has very good hands for a big guy that, I think the one thing that you really think maybe missing from what he's done so far this year would be some red zone targets. I think that might be something that they might look to get him involved in a little bit more.
That's what I was going to say is between the 20s, I don't know that I would utilize him much differently. I know that there haven't been a ton of opportunities in general for this team in the red zone, but that is probably where I would be looking at for him to make an impact going forward if you were going to change up what we've seen up to this point at all. Of these three, who do you most likely think has a shot to be the OC next year? Byron Leftwich, Antoine Randall. That's an interesting one to throw in here. Or an internal promotion, Sullivan/Faulkner.
I think Byron Leftwich is a realistic candidate. I think he has a chance.
I do too.
I think he will be given an interview almost 100%. Antoine Randall has never been an offensive coordinator. I can't see them doing that. It's just not really their style. I don't think it's what they really need.
It seems to be doing a decent enough job with the Lions wide receivers, but yeah, how's that helping?
I'm making this hire. I truly believe that the number one reason that Matt Canada was fired was the lack of development of Kenny Pickett. I am making this hire with someone that has developed a quarterback at the NFL level. And I think Byron Leftwich, while though didn't really develop Tom Brady, was a quarterback at the NFL level and has experience as an NFL offensive coordinator. I can see it. I can put it in my mind how Byron Leftwich could be the guy that gets Kenny Pickett over the top as an NFL quarterback. I can see that happening. Where does Antoine? I just don't see Antoine Randall. I'll throw another guy in here. Deuce Staley, let go by the Carolina Panthers. I think would make a good NFL offensive coordinator. I don't think he should be the Steelers' hire. I think they need someone with the quarterback bona fides that those guys don't have. And I don't think that's why I don't think it'll be an internal promotion either. I think they have a lot of respect for Eddie Faulkner. I think they want to keep him around. But I think that there needs to be someone brought in to be a real quarterback developer for Kenny Pickett.
That's exactly what I was going to say is they might be qualified as hell for the position. I don't think they're qualified for the position in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I think Deuce Staley would be a really good NFL offensive coordinator. I think Antoine Randall could be an NFL offensive coordinator, but I just don't think they're right for the Steelers right now. And so I think of those three, I would say Leftwich would be overwhelmingly the most likely to me, but I don't get the sense that this is going to need to be some kind of like Pittsburgh ties job. I think Mike Tomlin already fights the perception that it's like this get along gang kind of like, hire my buddies kind of place. And he has wonderful reach within the coaching community that I don't see why you would restrict like I would think Pep Hamilton is more likely than all three of those, just as a name off the top of my head, as a guy who I know is available, who developed Andrew Luck as his offensive coordinator when he was with the Indianapolis Colts, that I think has a relationship with Mike Tomlin, interviewed for the job last time. I think that's a more likely candidate than those three you named. I don't think you need to limit yourself to looking at people with obvious Pittsburgh connections.
That's who I wanted last time, actually, was Pep Hamilton. So, question, this goes, we've talked a lot about the depth recently, how well Trenton Thompson's played, Michael Walker. Is this the first time either of you have felt more comfortable about the Steelers situation in terms of having to have multiple starters or multiple backups start multiple games in your fandom / coverage of the team without feeling a sense of panic? I was looking back at those late 2000s teams, and I feel like this is a first for me where I feel comfortable in that position.
I think the Steelers have historically had good depth in certain places. Like, I feel like the wide receiver position has generally been one where you felt good about the guys down the depth chart more often than not. Edge rusher has almost always been the position where there was, in fact, usually a guy that you were like very much like the fan base is with Nick Herbig right now. Like, you don't want TJ Watt to get hurt, but at the same time, you would be excited to see what Nick Herbig could do, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they have often had that kind of depth at those positions. I'll say that I don't feel like safety and off-ball linebacker have been those positions very frequently. I think those have
Yeah.
not been positions where you traditionally have felt just so good about the Steelers having guy after guy at those spots that they could deal with injuries in the way they have this year.
Yeah, and even like you looked at the roster this year, I would have said, obviously, looking at the edges, that we could see that depth right away. With linebacker and safety, those had to get answered because I wouldn't have seen that coming. You know how well Michael Walters played, how well Trenton Thompson's played. They had to answer those questions in real time. I to a bit of a surprise to me how well they've played. I wouldn't really question how well we would get production from, Marcus Dolan or Nick Herbert if one of those guys had to step into a role. Trenton Thompson and Michael Walker, a little bit different story where I was questioning it, but
And
certainly they
even to
played
some
well.
extent, just Landon Roberts being a full-time player.
Yeah.
DeMarcus
Yes.
KZ being like not just a full-time player, but kind of that guy as the whole leader of the secondary. Like those two guys have stepped into more prominent roles and done a very nice job of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. This one's interesting. So this is specifically about Sunday, really, because it was the first time we saw them put up like that many yards, but still only 16 points. How do you think the Steelers build upon their success to finish drives getting more points? Obviously, the yards were there. What was the reason that their drives were stalling out in the way that they did, in your opinion?
I think it's a combination of a couple things. One of them is that like what Cincinnati was doing on defense, uh, with playing those like twin deep safeties, the closer you get to the end zone, like those safeties are closer and closer. Like they don't have as far to go. It shrinks the defense, and so there was less of that room underneath that they were taking advantage of with Pat Freiermuth. I thought some of the play calling when they got around the 30-yard line started to get a little clunky. There were some sideways passes I didn't love in there. They got a little cute a couple times. They got a little conservative a couple times. Like I didn't think that was one area where the play calling was particularly good. But I'll say this, like the thing about this game is, so they have 4 trips to the red zone. They fumble once. Even if we say, like, very charitably, like, they should have scored a touchdown the first time. Okay, let's give them that touchdown, okay? Let's say they score 23 points instead of 16. Let's say they're 2 for 4 in the red zone instead of 1 for 3. Like, that's still not very good for 400 yards. Like, there's a long way to
Sure.
go there in terms of both the execution of the red zone. Also, they had one drive where they stopped at the 23. So, like, that doesn't count as a red zone trip, but is essentially another trip to the red zone. And then I think, like, I'll be honest, I could blame Mike Tomlin for some of it. You can't punt on 4th and 1.5 from the 42-yard line. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, I think he's got to own that and the challenge. So, I think it's a multi-layered thing. I don't think there's one answer to the question, but I think we've got to stop focusing so much on the yards. Like that was not a good game because they got 400 yards. It was a bad game because they scored 16 points against a garbage defense. Like the yards don't matter. Like they don't. Like the points matter. The yards are sometimes connected, but we've seen how many times this year them not be connected. Like the entire theory of this team's defense is that the yards don't matter. So if the yards don't matter for the opponent's offense and the yards don't matter for the Steelers offense either, you got to score.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Honestly, like, yeah, you can't argue it in favor of the defense and also, try to make it an argument for the offense. Yeah, that's an interesting point. It just seemed like it was one thing, like like Roger Jones, a holding penalty on one. Obviously, the turnover is going to be 1, 3 punts in plus territory. Yeah, I mean, there was just little things here and there that,
there's a
again,
lot.
just didn't lead to more
But
points.
I thought at the end they were very conservative with the lead against a team they just did not think could come back, and I can sort of understand that one. That one feels more reasonable than the punt early and the lack of challenge and the fumble. Those are things that really shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. And then the last one's about Najee Harris that we got here. What's your take on the seeming arrival of Najee Harris? Besides running more downhill, seems like he's running with more juice. One of the best running backs this year in terms of explosive runs. If both running backs keep this up, it will make the run much easier.
He has been much more explosive this year, and I'm not sure that there's really an easy answer to point to. I think one of the things is that he is getting hit in the backfield far less often than he was in the past, especially compared to like 2021. They were a little bit better about that down the stretch last year, but I felt like last year it was a lot of like just get 3 yards, kind of like they were sacrificing sort of intentionally the high end potential of their runs to make sure that they didn't lose yardage. Like when you're developing a blocking scheme, like there are some blocks that you put on paper that are easy. Like here's a triangle double team. It's this guy and these two guys here are going to double team this guy. Like bang, get him. Like that's easy. Okay. Like we're sure we're going to do that. Now, okay, you draw one up. It's like, all right, it's a reach block. You help with this guy, and then you get to the second level and you cut off the linebacker from coming across. It's like, well, you can draw that up, but we're going to do that about like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, actually able to execute that block perfectly the way it's drawn up. And I feel like at the end of the year, last year, when they turned to the running game, it was very much a turn to the running game as a white flag. Like, we just don't want to lose yards. Like, let's get the 3. Okay, let's do that simple block. Whereas now I feel like, especially since Broderick Jones is in the lineup with his athleticism, they're trying and hitting some of those more difficult and more varied blocking schemes. It's not just a lot of the same play. They're trying a lot of different stuff. And because of that, they're not just getting 3 yards, but they're getting occasionally big holes and opportunities to hit big plays that I think they were just they didn't even hope for last year because they were so bad early in the season and in 2021 at getting him hit in the backfield. They were just trying to make sure they got 3 yards all the time. And now I feel like they're a little bit more ambitious with what they're attempting with the running game.
Yeah, I think last year, even when they got the run game going, I feel like it was a lot of, between the tackles, the guards were playing really well, but a lot of it was inside. This year, I think they're a better perimeter.
Football, kind of just head down.
Yeah.
And,
This year, I feel like they're better at running to the perimeter as well and making plays on the outside. I mean, you got a better blocking. Allen Robinson, one of the best blocking receivers. Darnell Washington, the way that he can block, the way that these guys get out in space and move, whether it's, Samalo pulling, you've seen Broderick Jones pulling, like these guys are getting out in space and creating in the run game too. So I think that has opened a lot because they're able to, again, be able to get to the perimeter and set stuff up as opposed to just running inside on every single play.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're better on the perimeter. And I think they've just come up with a better menu of running plays. Like, I really think the creativity of the running game before this has happened before Canada was fired, but we saw them break out trap runs and tosses, and just feels like they have a more varied menu, and that they're really like, it's a very intentional job of like probing defenses for weaknesses and trying things and being a little bit more ambitious with the running game instead of just trying to get 3 yards and stay on schedule all the time.
Also, we've talked about this too, and again, this goes back to prior to Matt Canada being fired, so it was happening even when he was here, but it seems like they've really owned in on and found the way that like the recipe works for using both backs and understanding what they have in each one.
Well, I felt like they were getting better at that, and then the one thing I thought was missing from that process that they got on Sunday was riding the hot hand. I feel like that was the other thing Sunday where you just saw as that game went on, it was clear Najee was the guy. They kept going to him. And that's when a big back like him is going to get those explosive runs, when he can use the cumulative impact of his day as a weapon against people, I think that really specifically is a big deal for him.
Yeah, plus 32 yards over expected on Sunday for Najee Harris, who was
broke that
very
down
good.
on the site at SteelersNow.com. Story ran early this morning, actually. Dug into some next-gen stats. Cincinnati, I'm not sure what Cincinnati's defense was doing, honestly. They kind of made some
I don't think their safeties like to tackle.
Decisions about the way they wanted to approach stopping the Steelers that I'm not sure anyone else is going to do all year. But one of them was 0 stack boxes against the run all game. And I do think that light boxes and Najee Harris are a wonderful combination for the Steelers.
Well, I watched their game, Cincinnati's game. I went back and watched it against the Ravens prior to playing the Steelers. I don't know that their safeties enjoy tackling. I like they're playing tackle football out there. I don't think their safeties like to tackle though. So
you can
maybe they went into that meeting.
Feel the impact of the salary cap related losses of guys like Jesse Bates in that defense.
And Von Bell. Yeah. Von Bell too, going to Carolina, who was a big part of that as well. I like the addition of Nick Scott when it happened, bringing him over from the Rams.
And I like obviously, that too. But I think that it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else, Alan?
No, I think that's it. I will try not to die tomorrow, and we'll do this again.
I hope that tea treats you well. Tell the people where they can find you.
Saunders_PGH, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com. Like and subscribe to YouTube channel. Subscribe to Steelers Now Plus, 10% off, promo code Allen10. Derek's got a story. Nick Farabaugh's got a story coming up about a lot of the things that we talked about in this podcast in terms of the differences in the Steelers running game.
Love to see it. Love to hear it. Be on the lookout for that. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Leave us a comment down below and leave us a 5-star review if you are listening somewhere else. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for taking another ride with us on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.